Hey, it's Coach Taylor from SmarterTeamTraining.com. I got a guy on the phone here that I've been trying to get on for years, and I'll be honest with everybody here. He's a hard guy to get a hold of, but he's unbelievably knowledgeable, and he's well worth the persistence and just the stick-to-itiveness to go get this guy on the phone and talk to him and learn from him. If he's presenting somewhere, if he's teaching somewhere, if he's doing a seminar, you need to go listen to this guy do his thing. And I know Paul is a very humble guy. So I'm going to blow up his ego here and blow up his confidence. But, man, this dude has an unbelievable wealth of knowledge that can enhance a lot of our conditioning, shaping our programming and how we actually get things going on for the sports community as far as getting people prepared to perform their best on game day. So Paul Robbins is the guy's name. It's been an honor to call him a friend for a long time now. We've gone way back from asking questions about heart rate training and then even all the way up to now with how we monitor athletes a little differently and just asking questions about energy systems and everything from the gamut of conditioning. So, Paul, man, you know how excited I am for this phone call. I've been banging emails at you and text messages and a whole bunch of things to get you on the phone, man. So I'm looking forward to an outstanding conversation with you, buddy.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for having me. It should be a lot of fun. I do appreciate you taking the time to do this. I've been out running around the country with the NBA teams this whole year, so it's been hard to nail things down, but I'm looking forward to this. Thanks.
Paul, man, I know your background. You and I have met in person. We've got a chance to hang out several times. We've been on the phone many times. I want to know and be able to share with the listeners here a bit about your passion. I mean, what gets you excited about this field, and can you tell me a little bit about what you have going on now, my man?
My focus has been a little bit different than most. When I started doing this 25-plus years ago, I realized there was a lot of strength coaches out there. But my passion is more conditioning. So that's where I really focused everything on is, understanding energy systems and understanding the conditioning part of the athlete. When I worked for many years for Athletes Performance, I was one of the original 5 guys there with Mark Verstegen. My focus was energy system development, and I designed all the cardio programs for them. I was with Mark for about 12 years, technically under Athletes Performance for maybe 10 years. A lot of people know it now as EXOS. So that's what my passion was. I love taking the guys out on the field and conditioning them, taking them to a whole new level, understanding that it's not just wind sprints. My whole thing is that, if you throw up when you're working out with me, then obviously I did something wrong. You might taste it, but you're not going to throw up. So it's getting the guys to another level. So, that all the strength conditioning and then all the position coaching that they've done over the years, they can still do that at the end of the game. So my passion is watching the end of the games and seeing that next level and seeing guys come through in the clutch. So that's what gets me going every day.
Way back when I first started learning about who you are and what you kind of do, obviously we were in that the front side of that heart rate training zones and those types of things. In that conversation you and I had several times just to find out more information about what we could do to really enhance the monitoring feedback. And then the conversation is beyond and beyond and beyond. And still to this day, we still continue to ask more and more questions about what's going on. But I want to start with the heart rate scenario from the beginning, if you wouldn't mind. There's still people with many questions. There's even some organizations that are still having heart rate type conversations in their clinics and conferences and in presentations. So there's still a curiosity about how we can monitor heart rate and how it can actually add or detract from our training. But does monitoring heart rate alone give us enough information about what the body is going through during a training or during practices or even during games?
Heart rate's a good place to start. And again, years ago when I first started doing this, that's pretty much all we had. We've always known the most important thing is power output, some kind of wattage, some kind of way to measure power. That is the most important thing. And heart rate is a guide, and that's where some people get misled, is that they think the heart rate is the answer. Heart rate is a guide only. It's still a very good guide to this day, but you should have some reference to go along with it. And what I mean by that is that, I can get your heart rate up to a very high level. But what kind of workload did it take to get there? And how many reps, how many sets, whatever I have to do, how long does it take to get there? On the other end, if you just look at just power itself, if you just did one 4 or 5 second burst, right, we're definitely going to be at the high end of the energy systems here, using creatine phosphates up, ATP in the muscle, all of that right at the very top end there for that short little burst there. But did your heart rate ever get up that high? Not in 4 seconds, probably not. Now, if you did a number of those 4-second bursts with, 20, 30 seconds in between, eventually your heart rate's going to get up there. So it's a guide to tell me that how much I'm working, but it's not the absolute. I need that power output as well. So that's where we are with heart rate. The good thing is now, years ago, that's all we really had was heart rate. Even bikes and treadmills out there, you couldn't use their wattage because it wasn't calibrated. The only good one out there is Woodway for treadmills because they are slats, so you're not going to spread out the belt over time, so the wattage is not going to change. So that's why I like using those types of treadmills, because I'm going to be able to know that 3 miles an hour is 3 miles an hour, 10 is 10. That's the power output. And then, again, use the heart rate as my guide. So the best part about the industry now is that it's just blowing up. Different ways that we can measure that power output. And it's coming from just the simple things on a bike now that they have true wattage on them, all the way to, equipment that we can measure movements on the field. So, and that's where I'm working right now, mainly with the NBA and the NFL teams, is I'm measuring guys while they're actually on the field and looking at power output.
When we're talking athlete monitoring, and I say that from a very broad scope, is there a prevalent sport that uses this more often than others? Is it just something that we do here in the U.S., or are we doing it in other countries that might even be ahead of us, for that matter? And then how are research institutions looking at the amount of data that's being collected?
That's a great question and kind of a long question to answer, but I'm going to try. So obviously we're way behind. The United States is way behind. And I started doing some of this stuff when I was still with Athletes Performance and the Adidas project called MiCoach. We were out there doing projects with soccer in Europe. So, and that's when we were running into camera systems which can actually track players. My job now, I work for a company called STATS. STATS is based in Chicago, and it's basically, you think of it, all the box scores that you see, all the data that you'll see. If you're watching the Final Four, or if you're watching the NBA Finals and coming up here, you will see the Stats name run across the bottom because they collect all the data on all the teams. We took it to another level, the concept that was the camera tracking in soccer, and took it and brought it into basketball. So what I'm currently doing right now is tracking everybody in the NBA, every player, every quarter of a second, every movement they make. So I can get speed, power output, accelerations, decelerations, fatigue indexes. And that's what I do right now working with NBA teams, is to determine, what types of programs for conditioning in certain guys, what type of recovery is needed for them. And that's all monitored at the highest end right now is cameras. Now, that's where we're at right this minute, but it's actually going to be even crazier here shortly. We're going into radio frequency type of technology. The NFL has already started doing that with a company, and now there's a bunch of other ones coming out. Those are going to be just little radio frequency tags that will be on the shirts, in the shoulder pads of the athletes. And that will be able to track every movement of all those players even more precise than even the cameras can do. So that's the direction everything's going. There's obviously a ton of other monitoring that's going on right now. It's a lower level, but those are the real high ones that we're working on at this point.
When we're talking conditioning, generally the concept of either sport-specific or sport-appropriate conditioning generally comes up. And I want to even move further along the line, even talking about position-specific conditioning, and even potentially the playing style or what the coach's expectation of that individual is during a game. I mean, when developing a sport or position-specific conditioning plan, what are some characteristics that I should be looking for from this type of data, including heart rate monitoring and even speed changes, velocity changes possibly during a game?
Yeah, that's a great question because this technology, at first, again, it was just a lot of heart rate. So we were trying to just mimic heart rate zones and what they're going to be in. And now we're getting into accelerometers on them, these radio frequencies like I mentioned. And now we're even going to the next frontier is actually even going to be very small patches that these guys wear. We're actually testing them out now where guys will wear a patch with its accelerometer and heart rate in it, and for multiple days at a time. So this patch stays on for 48 hours or more. So we can collect a lot of data on it. And what we're really trying to do with that sport specific and then position specific is what is the actual demand on that athlete? How many times do they truly accelerate? How many times do they accelerate to the right, to the left? What is their difference between their right and the left? Is there a difference at the beginning of the game and the end of the game? So that's where we really should start bringing it down to how do we design, going back to my energy system background, how do I design a conditioning program based on the actual demand of that player and that position? And I say really the player more than even the position because especially in the NBA, we've got guys that guards. We'll have a guard in the NBA that has completely different demands on their bodies, even though they're both considered guards on two different teams. One guy, we call it our mechanical load, and he accelerates and decelerates a lot of change of directions. And then we have another guard. He runs around. He covers a lot of ground. It's a physio load. He covers a lot of distance in that game. So there's two different guards that both play in the NBA, both at a very high level, but I got to train them differently. One guy I got to train to run. The other guy I got to train to accelerate and decelerate a lot so he doesn't blow up his leg. Now, on the flip side of that, then I also have to understand when I am guarding that player or that player is guarding me, how is that going to affect me as a player? So I have to train to be able to do that as well. So that's where it's really coming down to that sport-specific, player-specific type of thing, using the accelerometer just to tell me what are the demands on that body by that player and how do I have to guard them. So and that's going to happen in every single sport. So that's why it's smaller accelerometers, radio frequency tags, things like that. The more I can monitor a player, track a player, the more I understand what that player is doing.
I want to talk a little bit about the monitoring and also a little bit of the energy system kind of conversation and how the body responds to the heart rate being in what we consider particular zones. How are we defining what zone a heart rate should be in when we're training, and what is really occurring when we are in those particular zones for a bigger or less of an explanation, I guess? Do we really have any idea what the body is actually doing at 80%?
No, that's why heart rate's a guide only. So I use a very simple 3 heart rate zones. There's again, maybe if I'm working with an elite cyclist or elite triathlete, I might spread that out to 4, maybe even 5, depending on how good they are, and I can truly dial down their watts is what I'm really going to do, and then associate some heart rates with that. But for the most part, especially with my guys in the NBA and the NFL, I use 3 heart rate zones. So, and I try to keep it very simple. There's an aerobic zone, all right? That's going to be something that they're going to be able to sustain for a long period of time. Then there's that anaerobic threshold. Again, something for these athletes should be able to do for a long period of time. So those are the 2 zones that they'll spend a lot of time in. Then there's the anaerobic zone. And the anaerobic zone is not based on heart rate. And that's where a lot of people get misled as they try to pick apart the anaerobic zone by heart rate. Anaerobic zone is definitely going to be based off of power and time. It's like how long can you sustain at this high power is really what energy system I am using, not how long my heart rate got there. And again, I use the example of like a bench press. If I did 1 max rep all out and it took me just seconds to do that, I completely used the top of my energy systems to do that and wipe them out because I can only do it 1 time. but did you hit your max heart rate? I certainly hope not. If you're lying there on a bench, you're not going to hit your max heart rate with that one rep. But I did use all the ATP, creatine, phosphate, whatever systems I was going to use right at the top end of that one rep. So that's where heart rate went up at those top zones. I use that as a guide still. It's like maybe my max heart rate, my training heart rate max is around 190. I want to do a series of drills and exercises, and I want to eventually hit that 190. And if I'm getting a little over that 191, I'm going to shut them down and recover. And I'm going to look more important on how fast that heart rate drops back down. Heart rate recovery is more important to me than that top heart rate. I'll use it as a guide to say, all right, I've done enough for this guy right now. Let's recover. I'm not going to say what energy system he was using at that time because it all depends on what the drill was and how long that drill took. It wasn't, hopefully it's going to take him a long time to get that 190. If it gets there very quickly, that's not good. But if it drops quickly, that is good. So those are the ways that we use the heart rate, not to pick apart energy systems. I want the drills, because I know what energy systems I need in that drill for that athlete. I want the time and the power to tell me that. I'm using my heart rate as a guide saying, all right, I know at 190, 191, this guy's going to start fading on me. Let me just bring him back down. That's the end of this drill. Let's go to something else.
If we get an opportunity to evaluate heart rate, power, even velocity as a whole, if we're lucky enough to have all of that information coming to us, how can we monitor an athlete's overall progress, and how should it affect training, the recovery, even game prep? I mean, can you walk me through a little bit of that process? When what I don't like seeing is the paralysis by analysis. We get all this information, and then we just kind of like throw darts at things and just say, hey, this is what it means, and not really looking at the bigger picture. I mean, what are you looking at to really help define us as far as our preparation and even potentially getting people off their feet and really doing something in an alternative way?
Another great question, because I try to keep it very simple. My job with especially with the NBA right now, is I have a number of the NBA teams that consult with me on, weekly. I write them a report, and we try to keep that very simple. I use a lot of pictures and graphs, and basically just a few metrics that we use. So again, we have data every quarter of a second of every game on every single player that's out on that court. So can you imagine the data that we have? And in baseball, they're doing even more. They're going to have even more data than that they're starting this year, tracking the field players and the base runner. So they're going to have, you can get completely lost in the data. What we really want to do is bring it down to 4 or 5 metrics and then try to truly understand those 4 or 5 metrics. So I'll give you an example in the NBA. We look at what we call a physio load. That is basically a power output. That is speed, distance, body weight of a player. So how much work that they are actually doing. I measure that, and I track how much work these guys are doing. In the NBA, we use a lot of game data because there are so many games. They'll play 3-4 games a week. Even some stretches, they'll even do 5, which is a lot. So they don't practice that much. So the days off are their recovery days. So they're on during those game days. So that's where my data is very valuable. So we'll look at that overall load, and then I'm going to look at the intensity. And I usually look at mechanical intensity, which is accelerations and decelerations. And when the load gets to a certain amount and the intensity starts to drop off, that's inefficiency. That's what we're looking for. It's like, okay, this guy needs a break. Or this guy, we need some type of recovery program or something like that for a player. So same thing in practices in football. It's like there's so much load that a person can handle, and then once they can't handle that, their intensity will start dropping off, or the number of high-end accelerations will start dropping off, or maybe their heart rate recovery is not dropping as fast. So I'm looking at how much work they can do, and then what is that response to it? How do they respond to it, and how can I determine when they're becoming inefficient? When they become inefficient, that's when we need to do more recovery programs, and then try to get them back so I can continue. Because the whole goal is how much load can I put on this guy, and he can still handle. So those are the little ways that we're looking at it, and we try to keep it to very simple metrics. We don't overload them with a lot. Only time that I'll go into deep metrics may mainly would be for a injured player trying to come back. I have more time with him. I have more data on him, and it's more one-on-one. I can look at the difference between the right and left sides, if there was a lower body injury and things like that, so we can get more detailed then. But if you're high end with your teams and stuff, try to keep it as simple metrics and showing what is inefficient to that player.
I've been using heart rate monitoring for a long time, and I've gone through my gamut with athletes' responses from the hey, I don't want to put the strap on because I don't want you to find out that I'm not in shape and I have to end up doing more running. And then I also have people go the other way and will actually come down every day to see how hard they're going at practice so they can justify days off to coaches and really try to be really, really smart with their body, if you want to say that. I mean, can monitoring athletes help reduce the risk of overtraining, injuries in general, and then also maximize performance? I mean, a lot of times coaches are obviously very concerned about injuries, and then they're also concerned about performance. I mean, depending on the outlook of how we are monitoring and how the culture of that information is being presented to both the athlete and the coach, I mean, how can we maximize our buy-in from all the people that are in the program?
That becomes a major issue right now at the professional level. It's like, okay, I'm paying this guy a lot of money. I got to keep them on the court. People are coming to watch this guy play. So it's definitely, even the NBA league, you know, they don't like to see guys miss games because of again, it's their product that they're trying to sell. So the main thing that we're really trying to do is how do we, you know, marry this information with the head coaches' philosophy, and, you know, how do we, especially this time of year when the teams are getting ready to go into the playoffs or in the playoffs, you really need to focus on that and try to figure out what is a good marriage between the two. So what we've been working with is instead of trying to give guys complete days off, we've been looking at, it's like, all right, how maybe you shave a few minutes off at a game, in, you know, 30 seconds here in a quarter, a minute here in this quarter, stuff like that, to try to just to play around so we can keep both going at the same time, meaning the performance level at a very high level, but then not burning him out doing too much so he's not going to have anything left for the end of the season. And, you know, again, we're using that with our camera data right now, but just in training clients, even using heart rate, we would have a heart rate training load for them. How much load can they handle? And again, looking at that inefficiency would determine, like, what can they truly handle? And I'm trying to get the most out of them. So it's definitely, we're right at the beginning of that. I'm going to say that nobody really understands what those numbers are yet, but we certainly are playing with it. And that's the beauty of this industry right now, is everything that I'm talking about, this monitoring. A lot of people probably didn't even know this is going on. You know, the NBA players didn't even know this was going on until last year, and I've been tracking them for the last 4 years. So we're right at the beginning of it. So there's still a lot to learn, and then you got some old school head coaches that we still have a lot of education to get through.
If you're talking monitoring athletes, their movements, their velocity, their workload, et cetera, the next jump is probably going to go into, well, how does that enhance our nutrition and then potentially hydration and sleep and those types of things. But how is energy output being determined, and then how is this information being used to aid nutritional needs of a player?
That still will come back to, you know, we're trying to figure out, you know, how much they have to take in as far as fuel. And so these patches that I made reference to so there'll be small patches that we can put on a guy. You know, you can think of it that some people are trying to use the Fitbit or products like that. Unfortunately, they're not going to be reliable enough for our athletes. But these patches are, because they're basically accelerometer heart rate, and then some other new sensors coming out here shortly that we can't discuss yet, but we should be having out midsummer. But what I can do now is I can monitor that player for 24 hours at a time. So I can not only look at how much energy he expends during his workout, but what's he do the rest of the day? How much energy is he expending throughout the day? So that will help us with the nutrition. And then if we start getting some additional sensors that will understand, you know, things like electrolyte usage and lactate thresholds and stuff from these sensors. That type of stuff is going to also help the nutritionist design when and what to take in, so more personalized for that athlete. Then we take it all the way to the sleep part. The reason that I got into the patch technology and research 2.5 years ago was for sleep. That's the most important thing to me, is how well are they recovering. So you could have a great day, great training program, but if you don't recover for the next one, eventually you're going to start breaking down. So we want to look at sleeping patterns. We want to look at how long and how well do they sleep, how much movement do they have at night. And so that's where all of this is going, and then that will all come back into the nutritional plan as well, so people understand when to eat and what types of food to eat. I mean, it's the NBA is an absolute crazy schedule. They travel a lot. It's not uncommon for them to get in at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and have to play that night. I was with a team here just last Monday, and so I was on the road with them, and basically I went to an 11:30 meeting with them, and thinking that I'm going to eat with the team. They were eating breakfast. It was 11:30, but to them, because they got in so late, everything is shift back. So the time zones and stuff that they're playing with, it's very important in trying to understand all of that. So they're trying to put their meals around that time zone, so they try to stay on it. So the guys are more familiar, and hopefully that's going to, down the road, make it a better season for them.
I want to talk about realistic expectations. I know there are coaches out there that will go and spend $3,000-$4,000 on heart rate monitoring straps and watches, and they get it in, they'll get it set up, they'll put it on their athletes, and immediately after practice, they want to know if they're in shape or out of shape, and they want that instant feedback. I mean, what's a realistic time period to collect data and actually provide some legitimate feedback to the team and the plan, the way you're approaching the conditioning needs or just the athletic development needs of an individual? Can you walk me through a little bit of that process? Is there a little bit of a time period where we need to just step back and let the data start being collected before we just jump in and make a conclusion about how fit or unfit the team is?
Well, there's a couple answers to that. Number one, when I was at Athletes Performance, we actually did a VO2 assessment on every single player that came in. So I would at least get a good feel of what their top heart rate was and what their recovery heart rate was, really, and aerobic threshold heart rate. So I wasn't looking at VO2 numbers so much. I was actually looking at getting heart rate numbers, because an athlete there might only been with us for 2 weeks. So I can't waste a lot of time trying to figure out what numbers to use with this guy, and I certainly can't use some age-predicted formula. So that's what we did. It was very successful at that time, so then, boom, I can jump right in. I could pretty much tell them based on that VO2 number what level of fitness that they're at, so I can design the program. But more important, I had some heart rate zones just to at least start with. And so even from the very beginning, if I was going to just get heart rate system, that's the first thing I do. You don't have to do a VO2 test, but maybe just do a ramping test on a bike or a treadmill just to get some top heart rates and heart rate recovery. If I got those numbers to start off with, I can start using that system right now, because what I'm going to look for is how hard am I pushing them and how well they're recovering. And again, when their recovery is not doing so well, maybe I'm getting to an over training state, or how many sprints can I do with this guy? If his heart rate's still recovering, I'm good, let's keep going. So you could jump in and use that type of data right off. If you understand and get a good baseline on your players, and then obviously you can change that baseline as they go through, the more you learn. So we jumped in right in and used heart rate right from the beginning. All this other data on training loads, using accelerometers and using our camera systems, RF, whatever you want to use, that's going to take a little bit more time because there is no real standard yet. So for me, in an NBA season, I say I need at least 10 games of the NBA before I can even use their numbers to just see what kind of trend that player is doing. And all I'm doing is comparing them to himself. So I'd like to have at least 10. And in that case there, we're talking at least 3 weeks. If I got about 3 weeks of data, then I can start looking at trends. When I'm working with teams, especially right now with the NFL and stuff, our first year with the NFL teams, basically basically I was just telling them, I want to collect data throughout the entire season. I'll look at a few different trends and give you a little bit of insight of what's going on, but I really can't use that data until another whole year, because the difference between that is week 1 in the NFL and week 15 in the NFL are completely different. I can't use the data that I saw in week 1 and week 2 and compare to that with what's going on in week 15. It's just not the same for them. So I definitely need a good year's worth of data in this new technology to truly understand what's going on with the players and stuff, and then I can start using it. You can always look at trends throughout the season, but to sit there and design programs based off of it, certainly can't do that in your first year. And obviously, the more data right now, the big thing is injury prevention, understanding injuries, overuse injuries, things like that. In the NBA, I've done this now for 4 years. We've had 2 full years of the entire league. Before that, the 2 years before that was just partial teams, 10 teams 1 year, 15 the other. I barely feel that I have enough data to start even looking at that. I want at least 2 more years so I can really get a true database on that. So it's going to take time to collect this. But you've got some things you can do very quickly, looking at trends, looking at heart rate information, and then over time, this data is going to get richer and richer, and we'll start really understanding how to use it.
Paul, man, if there's somebody here that's listening to the show that maybe is an up-and-coming strength conditioning coach, and maybe they have an interest in this research aspect of it, or maybe they just don't like the being in the huddle aspect, and they just want to be in the lab and those types of things. I mean, there's so many cool different jobs in our field, in the sports performance world, that we need to really encourage people to go towards their strengths and their interests and their passion, and we can all help each other along the way. I mean, is there a motivational or inspirational message for somebody that's interested in pursuing the research aspect of our field that you wouldn't mind sharing with them?
Wow, it's wide open right now. That's that's the interesting part, is that we're looking for people. Everyone is teams are looking for people that understand this. I don't want to be taken the wrong way with this, but unfortunately, a lot of the U.S. Teams have gone elsewhere, because everything started like in Australia and Europe. Like I said before, they are way ahead of us here. So they're going and grabbing people from overseas and bringing them in and stuffing them into the NFL and the NBA and saying, here, you guys know, you've analyzed performance data in Australian rules football and, in rugby. Now come and help us out with our NBA team. It's not the same. So, I mean, that's the thing that we found. And again, there's some guys that come over and have done a great job, and then there's some other guys that come over and they really don't understand the sports. They don't understand the field. The NBA season, NHL season is completely different than soccer and Australian rules football. Where they play basically only once a week. And if you're playing in England, your time zone's just one time zone. You're basically playing in England all the time, opposed to if you play here in the NBA. In basketball, you're crossing time zones and playing multiple games back to back all the time. So understanding all of that. So really, it takes a person that has started to play with some of this data, understands numbers, understands math, but can relate to the U.S. coaches. That's the key piece right now, is can you relate to the U.S. coaches? Can you relate to a basketball coach or a football coach? Do you understand the sport enough? So what you're saying, you can take it down so they understand what it means in that sport, not just giving them a bunch of numbers. They want to understand the sport as well. So, or at least understand the demands of the sport. Again, I started doing a lot of stuff in European soccer. The last thing they want to do is listen to an American in soccer in Europe, let alone an American who has never played the game before. But once I told them and showed them how I understood the energy systems of that sport and the true demands of that player, then that makes a big difference. So that's where you really want to start looking at it. It's like, what is the demands of that sport? you like to understand that data? Do you have a math background at all? Can you create these reports? And then can you then talk as a strength coach to another strength coach? That's my job. All I do is talk to strength coaches all day. I have the greatest job in the world. I'll go and hang out for lunch, dinner, watch games and stuff with strength coaches, and all we do is talk about this data and then how does this relate. And I learned so much by sitting and talking to these guys. It's like, how does this relate to your team? Because every team is a little bit different. So that's the kind of person that's going to be needed out there, is a strength coach that understands data, but also understands that sport. So, and can relate to the coaches. Because there's the flip side of that. There's all these stats guys that are running around that know data really well. I would never put them in front of a coach. So you got to have somebody that can actually talk to a coach and understand what the coach's needs are and what's a practice really look like.
Well, Paul, man, I know you're a busy guy, and I want to say thank you very much, obviously, for your time here. Again, this is a show that I've been looking forward to having on for a long time. And if anybody had any questions about anything we talked about or wanted to connect with you about any questions in general or see what you have going on from a presenting or speaking or when you're going to be in their area kind of scenario, I mean, how could they go about reaching out to you and finding out more information about what you have going on?
Yeah, they definitely can. What I've decided, working with a number of groups like Woodway, Octane, I've been with these guys for a long time, and consulting on conditioning programs, and there's a few other products that I have found out there. So what I'm putting together is like a performance package. It's like I have my 5 phases of ESD, which is, how to develop somebody for conditioning from off-season all the way through the season, and then back to the next season. So I have the 5 phases of ESD program that I put together, and now I'm going to put together is like, okay, what type of equipment is needed with this, or how do you put it all together? It's going to be a very short little thing that I'm going to do as a promotional thing, mainly for a few companies. So if somebody wants something like that, I can definitely send it out to them. My email address is probbins@stats.com. And as far as speaking and stuff, it's I just do some major events now. I don't do a lot of small events anymore. I'll go out to some universities and speak, but for the most part, my focus is around the NBA and the NFL, and then obviously college sports is where we're really going from this point on.
Well, Paul, I know you're a busy man, and I want to get you off the phone here so you can get back to your day. Again, I appreciate calling you a friend, my man. It's been awesome to be able to use you as a resource many, many times, and I'm looking forward to many more opportunities to have a conversation with you to expand my knowledge about conditioning and monitoring and just to have somebody as a resource that thinks outside of the box or even, for that matter, thinks as if there is no box in general. I mean, some of the conversations we've had have really pushed the envelope of probably a decade, I'll even say that a decade above or before their time, what a lot of people are comfortable with. So, man, you're definitely out front of this curve, and I appreciate the opportunity just to share your story a little bit and hopefully inform the consumer here or inform the listener here on the show, man. So I look forward to keeping in touch. Hopefully this is just another launching pad for us to do many, many more things down the road. And if you're ever in the Baltimore area, man, please look me up because I'm definitely taking you out to dinner, buddy.
All right. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for everything.